Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. I want to apologize for the late start. We didn't quite get to the special closed agenda and we needed a few extra minutes, and I appreciate everybody's patience. And we'll now get underway. Call the public hearing agenda here. Go. Call the regular meeting of Township Council for the purpose of a public hearing and development permits to order. Of course, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and in particular, acknowledge our unique and special relationships with the Kaitsi, Kwantlen, Matskwe, and Semiahmoo First Nations. With that, Ms. Bauer, would you like to read the preamble?
A public hearing is a statutory requirement under Section 464 of the Local Government Act and must be held before third reading of a community plan, land use contract amendment bylaw, heritage designation bylaw, or heritage revitalization agreement. During a public hearing, council acts as a quasi-judicial role for the purpose of allowing persons who believe their interest in the property is affected by the bylaw, permit, or other matter to make representations to council either orally or by written submission, or add comments or elaborate on correspondence they may have already been presented to council concerning the bylaws. It is important to note that council is not in a position to receive any additional information on the bylaws following the close of the public hearing as dictated by case law. The hearing procedure involves an explanation from the Community Development Division on the purpose of the proposed bylaws and to hear from individuals regarding the bylaws. In order to ensure that all interested parties have a reasonable opportunity to be heard, speakers are requested to keep representations as brief and succinct as possible and no longer than 5 minutes, excluding time required for questions from council. Speakers will be asked to state their names, neighborhood, and city for the record, and if referring to prepared remarks, to submit copies of these to the Township Clerk. Decorum must be maintained at all times. This includes refraining from applause, booing, or heckling. To assist in large numbers of speakers, individuals must advise the Township Clerk and sign the speakers list prior to commencement of the public hearing. The names on the speakers list will be read out during the hearing. Individuals who have already addressed council and wish to add further submissions will have to wait until the people who have not yet addressed council have the opportunity to speak. All submissions and speakers list are considered part of the public record. Council members should not express their views nor debate the bylaws, but may question speakers to clarify particular points in the submissions. Council may consider third reading or third reading and final adoption at this meeting or at its next regular scheduled meeting.
Great, thank you. That'll get a motion to adopt and receipt of the agenda items moved by Councillor Pratt. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rint. Call the question on the agenda, A1. Carries unanimously. On to the public hearing, item C1, official community plan amendment and rezoning application number 100189, bylaw number 5843 and 5844. Mr. Richardson.
Well, thank you, Worship. The subject Yorkson Neighborhood Plan Amendment, rezoning, and development permit applications pertain to a proposed development consisting of 151 townhouse units and 8 fee simple lots at 20645 74B Avenue and 7521 and 7547 208 Street. The 11.2 acre site is designated mixed residential and multifamily in the Willoughby Community Plan and mixed residential and townhouses in the Yorkson Neighborhood Plan. This air photo depicts the site located north of 74B Avenue, west of 208 Street. Proposed Yorkson Neighborhood Plan Amendment Bylaw 5843 relates to the residential housing mix components of the plan and accommodates one single-family residential type and increases the permitted percentage of townhouses to 99%. Rezoning Bylaw 5844 rezones the subject site from suburban residential SR2 to residential compact lot zones RCLA, SD, and RH, and comprehensive development zone 77 to accommodate the proposal. Development permit number 101239 proposes to consolidate and reconstruct watercourses on the northwest portion of the site consistent with the township's streamside protection and enhancement area requirements. This slide indicates the proposed site plan. Staff recommends support of Yorkson Neighborhood Plan Amendment Bylaw 5843 and rezoning Bylaw 5844, subject to 11 conditions, and Development Permit 101239, subject to 5 conditions listed starting on page 6 of Council's agenda. Your Worship, a total of 364 notices were mailed out, where there are no written submissions received, and there are no individuals noted on the speakers list.
So with that, are there any submissions from the public regarding bylaw number 5843, bylaw number 5844? Second time, are there any submissions from the public on bylaw number 5843 and bylaw number 5844? And for a third and final time, are there any submissions from the public on bylaw 5843 and 5844? With that, we'll close the public hearing. If the proponent wishes to come forward and provide any information, not seeing that, close the public hearing on item C1. Does anyone wish to make a motion to consider third reading? Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Call the question on that. That carries with Councillor Richter opposed. Does anybody wish to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Ferguson. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on C1? Seeing none, call the question on C1. That carries with Councillor Richter opposed. Mr. Richardson, item C2.
Thank you, Your Worship. The subject Alder Community Plan Amendment and rezoning applications pertain to a proposed residential development consisting of 45 townhouse units and 25 single-family lots in the 2600 block of 268th Street. The 7.4-acre site is designated low-density residential and medium-density residential in the Alder Grove Community Plan. This air photo depicts a site located on the west side of 268th Street at 26th Avenue. Proposed Alder Grove Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 5882 includes single-family lots in the medium-density residential designation and permits a site density on a site-specific basis from 12 to 12.5 units per acre. Proposed rezoning Bylaw 5883 amends the existing suburban residential SR2 zoning to residential zone R1B, residential compact lot zone RCLA, and Comprehensive Development Zone 115 to accommodate the proposed 25 single-family lots and 45 townhomes. This slide indicates the proposed site plan. Staff recommends support of Alder Grove Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 5882 and rezoning Bylaw 5883, subject to 16 conditions listed on page 6 of Council's agenda. Your Worship, a total of 47 notices were mailed out, 2 written submissions have been received, and we have 1 individual note on the speaker's list. That is Diane Kask, Your Worship.
Great. Diane, come forward.
Honorable Mayor and Council, my name is Diane Kask. I live in Aldergrove. I agree with this development proposal since housing is needed. There will be a streamside protection in place. There will be pathways to the park, and there will be a buffer to the west ALR land. My concerns. The townhouse complex should be designed in a way to fit into a park setting, as it will be highly visible to everyone attending the park. There should be trees planted between the new housing and the Aldergrove Athletic Park to create a sound and visual barrier to protect residents of the new housing. Also, there needs to be a physical safety barrier to protect the new homes, which could just be prickly plants, anything that's protection. I also believe that 10 to 20% of the development should be affordable housing, affordable as in 30% of the tenant's income. There are many families with young children and seniors that would benefit. If the townhouses will be the 3-story variety, there needs to be an accommodation for an elevator. I have heard that closets can be installed one on top of the other so that in future the elevator can be installed economically. There should also be permeable ground cover wherever possible, since this area is on a slope in the Burton Creek watershed. If the heating and cooling of homes is run by electricity, there needs to be an alternative source of power, such as solar panels, at the minimum solar panel ready. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Are there any other submissions from the public? With the second time, are there any other submissions from the public? Bylaws number 5882 and 5883. And for a third and final time, are there any more submissions from the public on bylaw 5882 and 5883? With that, to close the public hearing on item C2. I don't know if the proponent's here. Do they wish to come forward? Not seeing that. Close the public hearing for item C2. Carry on here unless someone wishes to make a motion to approve third. I think we'll carry on here. Item C3, Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Worship. The subject Williams Neighborhood Plan Amendment and rezoning applications pertain to a proposed residential development consisting of a maximum of 196 townhouse units in the 21200 block of 83rd Avenue. The 12.2 acre site is designated multifamily in the Willoughby Community Plan. And single-family residential, row house, townhouse strata, and watercourse compensation area in the Williams Neighborhood Plan. This air photo depicts a site located east of 212th Street between 80th and 83rd Avenues. Proposed Williams Neighborhood Plan Amendment Bylaw 5890 designates a 0.5 acre northerly portion of the site row house townhouse and removes a 4 off-street parking per unit requirement. Proposed rezoning bylaw 5891 amends the existing suburban residential 2 zoning to comprehensive development zone 183 to accommodate the proposal. The slide indicates the currently proposed site plan. Staff recommends support of Williams Neighborhood Plan Amendment Bylaw 5890 and rezoning Bylaw 5891, subject to 18 conditions listed on page 8 of Council's agenda. Your Worship, a total of 206 notices were mailed out, 21 written submissions have been received, and there are 8 individuals noted on the speakers list. The first 2 are Nathan Hildebrand of Qualico Communities and Nicole Shepard.
Nathan Hildebrand, please come forward.
Your Worship, I'm speaking on behalf of Nathan. My name is Jonathan Meads. I'm the Vice President of Streetside Developments,
go ahead.
and I am qualified to speak on behalf of Qualico Developments Vancouver as well. Your Worship and Council, in regard to our rezoning application you see before you this evening, we are and have been in discussions with the Township and aware of some concerns regarding a neighbourhood traffic matter in a Township laneway to the west of our site, between 80th, or just north of 80th, between 211th and 212th. Whilst this traffic concern may not have been created by us, we are aware of neighbourhood concerns regarding it being used as a shortcut. We concur that this could be a challenge to local residents. As a result of our discussions with staff, we do want to just put out to everybody that whilst we didn't create it, we are prepared to work with the Township to find a resolution. And to this extent, we're prepared to donate $75,000 to the staff to address traffic calming approaches with Township staff. And hopefully that would resolve any concerns they've got there. We are sympathetic to it. We all have families. And some of the things we've also talked about would be, for example, potentially subject to code approvals, a fire crash gate at the entry that's shown at the south end of the site, so that the primary entrances, which are always intended to be further north, would be the ones used primarily.
Can I make a note of that? I have one question.
Yes.
I'm seeing other questions. Can you explain the rationale for the parking variance reduction?
Certainly, yes. So we're building a townhouse project. The bylaw calls for 2.2 stalls per home, so that includes for the visitor parking. Our count is actually at 2.8 per home, but the Williams plan did call for 4, but in a townhouse, that impacts affordability, because in essence, you're losing a lot of the land that you can create the townhouses with by adding in those extra stalls, for example, a front apron for 2 additional vehicles.
Okay. What was the rationale, too, for requesting the additional 4 units as part of the application?
I couldn't speak to the rationale for it because it was a part of the Williams NCP. We're asking for the relaxation to the 2.8 because we believe...
I got that. I moved on to the
sorry.
to the request for 4 additional townhouse density units.
I'm sorry, I'm not quite clear on your question with respect to the density.
Mr. Richardson, perhaps you can assist, just to clarify. A bit unusual, but I think I'd allow it, because I just want to make sure we have the facts right on this.
That was it's noted on page 13 of the agenda, the density bonuses for 4 units at $20,000 per unit, Your Worship.
Yeah, so there's a request in the application for 4 additional units over and above the permitted density. I was just curious the reasoning for that.
We actually aren't asking for all 196. That's if you apply the UPA exactly, the 15 UPA. We are actually at 14.22 UPA, which actually results at 173 homes. But if you apply the 15 UPA exactly to the land area, it would calculate to 196, not 192. I can't explain the difference in it because we're actually only applying for 173 homes.
Okay, I'll look into that at the conclusion of the public hearing. Any other questions, Council? No? Thank you for your submission.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Nicole Shepherd, Your Worship.
Great, thanks for coming.
Hi, good
Please go ahead.
evening,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor and Council. Thanks for having everyone here this evening. I come to you today as a resident of 80A Avenue in Langley. You'll see on the map there the laneway that the developer was talking about is a laneway that backs onto our house. Myself and a bunch of other parents in the neighborhood are beyond frustrated with the traffic problems that we're experiencing. It's not an issue of when it will become a problem, it already is a problem. So people that live on 212 use it as a raceway to get to 212 Street instead of going around the block. The laneway is designed so that we can get to our driveways. That is literally the only purpose of that laneway. We're requesting that the laneway be blocked at the south end to completely prevent traffic from going through there. Everyone who lives on that street has children, young children, pets. The traffic calming measures that we've requested through the city, we've just been told, oh, you're added to a list. No one has physically come out to look. Parents have taken it into our own hands to put up signs, children at play. Whenever we're back there, obviously the kids play street hockey and ride their bikes. Same as when we were all children, you move to the side of the road when a car comes down. Unfortunately, the rate of speed that the cars are going is not conducive to what the speed limit is in a laneway, which defined in the Motor Vehicle Act is 20 kilometers an hour. We've requested speed bumps. That hasn't been acknowledged. We put delineators out when the kids are playing to try and alert traffic. We had an incident last summer where my children's bike were at the end of the driveway. Somebody raced up the laneway, drove over their bikes. It's hard for me to talk about because my children were there 30 seconds before and the bikes were ruined. I appreciate I appreciate the developer's request to put money at the problem, but it's not gonna help until that laneway is blocked off.
So can I clarify, when you say closure at the south end, would you mean east or west? And I just want to make sure.
Sorry, east.
So it would be the,
Yeah.
it would be the
That
end.
would be near the entrance to the proposed development.
Yeah, so it would be not on 211th Street, it would be
Correct.
on the far side. So I want to make sure council is very clear of the
Yeah.
the request.
It's used as a speedway right now. We've given letters to the surrounding community and the streets, just sort of explaining the speed limit, just to please watch out for children. That's our primary concern. Of course, we teach them road safety, but you can't prevent a 3-year-old from running out when you're trying to get out the door with groceries and whatever. It's primarily for safety. That's the only reason we're requesting that it's blocked off. It's not to inconvenience a development. It's not that we're opposing a new development. It's literally just for safety.
I can certainly appreciate that. And I just want to confirm again, just clarification that I know you can't necessarily speak for every resident, but do you feel that there's sufficient support to consider fire stop or closure at the eastern end of that laneway?
Every single person in that laneway wants it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have another question. Councillor Pratt, do you wish to go ahead? Okay. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, which, was it 81A Avenue that,
So the laneway that we are is between 80 Avenue and 80A Avenue. So if you look on the map there, you can see the entrance to the proposed development would be right at the end of that laneway. So currently the laneway will connect to 212th Street, and that's the issue, is that people use it as a shortcut. Doesn't really save that much time, but they use it as just a raceway to get down to 212.
okay.
So it's just every home in this laneway has children. I mean, it's a high density neighborhood, and it's not safe.
Okay.
We've contacted the police numerous times. Unfortunately, they're busy with, drug overdoses, domestic abuse, violence. They don't have time to come sit in the laneway and patrol it.
Yeah. Now, the 80A Avenue entrance, the east entrance, that's where you want it blocked off, so that's
Yes.
right on 212th.
That's on 212th, yeah.
212, okay.
So, and that road connects further down, like you don't need access to the laneway to get to 212. So the sole purpose of that laneway, every row home that backs on there, their garage and driveway is back there. So that's the sole purpose of it, is just access to your house. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Richardson?
Your worship, next two speakers, Rachel Bailey and Cheryl Weens.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rachel Bailey. I'm a resident of 83A Avenue in Willoughby, Lynn Phipps area. I come to you today for two reasons. One, I am a resident and I am not in support of this development. The density already is quite high. And if you look at that area, it has a school and I work at that school. The 83rd Avenue also uses speedway. Yes, there are speed bumps, but I hear nightly and early in the morning people racing their cars down there. And there's children. 212 and 83A is extremely dangerous. I'm surprised nobody has been hit. The access point that you're proposing is on 83rd Avenue. They've closed that off to access. When we first moved in, my family and I, 6 years ago, it made a huge difference for children and families walking to and from school. 212th Street and 83rd Avenue, no one stops at that stop sign. They roll right through and then they stop when they see somebody. They never stop at that stop sign. There's a line, it's white, and they keep going. I always, when I walk home and to school, I also stop and I look always as an adult. There's children that are 5 all the way up to 11 when they're going to school there. They're not always paying attention and people turn left and right and they don't look. So putting that complex there and increasing the density is a high of concern for me, not only as a resident, but as somebody that works at that elementary school. There's going to be a problem. Somebody is going to eventually get hit. The other reason that I'm opposed for it is because of the current density that you see in the Willoughby neighborhood. Willoughby Elementary, Richard Bulpett Elementary, Lynn Phipps Elementary, Donna Gabriel Elementary, R.C. Garnet, it's a little bit full as we're farther away, but it is all part of the Willoughby slope. We are slammed. We are so full, we're bursting at the seams. We are the largest school in Phipps Elementary at 634 students. 135 of those students are not ours. They're from Willoughby Elementary and Richard Bulpett Elementary and Donna Gabriel Elementary. Where are these children gonna go? We keep putting more and more and more complexes into this area, but where are the parents going to put their children? They always say, oh, we bought a new house in the area. We're so excited to start at your school. I'm sorry, but you're on the wait list. You're going to have to see. You may come as an immigrant from Ukraine. You may come from Nigeria. You'll have no car. How are you going to get to school when you have to go to Willoughby Elementary? R.C. Garnet, we've sent people to Langley Meadows all the way by Costco because we have no space. So what are you going to do when you add more complexes to this area? It's hard to say that to parents. They're devastated. So if you look at the statistics, I've looked at all of the area around us, not including that strip. But if you look from 83rd Avenue all the way to 78th Avenue, that's a big green space that wants to be developed. 327 homes from 80th to 78th, 93 townhomes, 21 townhomes, 16 townhomes. One that wants to be subdivided into more. Then you want to put a maximum of 194 townhomes where we are. 31 townhomes across from 83rd. There's a small lot there. And then the apartment complex closer to 208th. There's going to be 144 units, 143 units, 79 apartments plus 12 and what have. If you keep on adding that, you're going to keep on adding density and you're going to keep on adding children. The market doesn't allow for people to have affordability for housing, so the smaller homes, the condensed home is going to bring those families in. And that's where my main concern is. Donna Gabriel Robbins is 1 year old. They're putting in 4 portables because there's not enough space. Richard Bulpett has 6 portables. Willoughby has 8. They're projecting to put 2 more in for 10. We have 4, and that's not too bad. They can't fit anywhere else due to other certain reasons. We've had to remove a resource room to make room for a kindergarten space. that allows children with special needs not to have their sensory space. Music room now shares before and after school care space. So when you add 194 more townhouse units, where are those children going to go? That is my main question and my main concern to you today, as well as that access to 83rd. It just can't happen. You're going to increase that traffic. You're going to add about 346 more cars, minimum. Where are they going to park? I know you're going to have places for the townhouses, but then they're going to have renters, because we all have renters in our basements. So you're going to add that too, that density. That's a hidden population that's going to come into those units that people don't really recognize as well. That's all about I have to say for now. I'm a little bit concerned as well because our community centers are full and people would like to have their kids participate in swimming lessons, adding more condensed living. There's no places for those children to go. My kid hasn't been in swimming lessons for more than 2 years because there's no space. So bring more families, bring more children. It's great. It's a great community. I love having the children there and having the families. I love the area I live in. But I think about the parents and the stress that you're going to put on those new families moving in those homes. It's going to be a great community, but just too dense. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
A couple slides here. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Cheryl Weens, and I live in a row home development in Willoughby, just west of the development proposal shown here at the 21200 block of 80th Avenue. I'll start with what I like about this proposal, and that is, despite what we heard about the schools, which is very, very true, I do like the missing middle level of density here. It is my opinion that if done correctly, densification reduces development pressure on farmland and sensitive ecosystems, it improves walkability, and increases transit system efficiency. My concern with this proposal is the road design. The main entrance to this development, while technically connecting to 212th, will essentially funnel traffic down our laneway, as residents from this proposed development look for the easiest and most direct way to get to 80th Avenue. You can see what I mean on the left-hand side of the slide, where I've zoomed in on what's labeled as the main entrance at the southeast corner. Residents in our lane have already experienced several incidents, which you've heard about, with vehicles coming from 212th Street using our laneway as a through road to get to 80th Avenue. Many travel too fast and don't watch for children who may be playing in the lane, walking to school, or going between houses to play with their friends. I can assure you that we drill it into the kids. Move out of the way for cars and look both ways before crossing the lane. But we need drivers and the township to do their part to keep our kids safe as well. And that includes the township doing everything it can to design safe roads. In my opinion, at least part of the problem here is that 80A Avenue does not go through to 212th Street from the west. A previous development proposal for the area, as shown on the left-hand side here, and the current neighborhood concept plan indicate an intent for 80A to pick up on the east side of 212th. Since drivers exiting the main entrance looking for the fastest, most direct way to get to 80th Avenue can't take 80A, they'll take our lane instead. Last August, our safety concerns peaked when a new driver who lives on 212th Street and who is using our laneway as a through road with their music blaring, hit a couple trikes that were parked on the curb of the laneway. Shortly after that incident, another laneway resident, Nicole and I, requested traffic calming measures for the lane. We have been told by township staff that we are on the traffic calming priority list. I believe that list had somewhere over 150 requests on it at the time. Unfortunately, that list is very long, and we have no idea when or if we'll ever see any traffic calming in our lane. My personal preference for traffic calming is a directional closure. I think that's the only way we can guarantee it'll actually work. Notably, the lane between row homes on the west side of 211th, just across from us, already has and has always had a directional closure, and that's circled in red there on your slide. What these pictures don't and can't show you is the real sense of community that exists amongst the residents in our lane and in the greater neighborhood area. Last summer, we received a grant from the United Way's High Neighbor program to throw a neighborhood party, and it was a huge hit. It was very well attended. In fact, at that event, we were able to raise a significant amount of money to go back to the United Way. It would be a real shame for poor road design to ruin the sense of community that we have cultivated over the years. I ask you, Mayor and Council, please do not approve this development application without first making amendments to the road design and installing traffic calming measures to prevent increased traffic in our lane. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Richardson, next speaker.
Thank you, Worship. Next speakers are Jackson Lumburner and Amanda Percival.
Good evening, Jack Limburner, Mayor and Council. I live at 21168 81B Avenue, and I'm speaking to oppose this new development. I'm glad we have that graphic up there. That's good to refer to. Some years ago, the UBC did a study regarding Metro Vancouver and where all the building was being done. And we can be proud in knowing that it was our area where all the growth was, greater than any other Metro Vancouver area. That's significant, and I'm sure very welcome by the people who need homes. In our area, we circulated a petition regarding this new development and asked for people to consider it, and if opposed, sign the petition. We have 181 signatures on that petition, and I'd like to present that to Council through the clerk here tonight. Some of the issues, of course, discussed when we were talking about this petition and our opposition was the traffic flow. And again, without access to the new development off of 80th Avenue, it funnels all those cars down to 11th and, as the previous speaker was referring to, down their laneway. 211th already, after speaking in that area, talk about the risks of the traffic on that road. And I learned recently that there's been a number of accidents along that road between 80th and 81A. Surprisingly, it's a nice wide street, but it's a downhill with a blind curve, a bit of a blind curve, and there's been 3 accidents in the last while. My neighbor in that area says that he's afraid sometimes to step out, open his car door and get into his vehicle, because if there's a car coming down and a car going up that hill on the curve, he's liable to get his door taken off. He did eventually get his mirror taken off the side of his truck, so that's how risky it is. I think there needs to be some consideration for how that traffic is going to access this new development from the 80th Avenue, if at all possible. I know 83rd, I look in that area and what's going to happen down that way with the young children that go from there over to Linfrip School. That's a risk there. The crosswalk at 81A Avenue, which is there at 211th and 81A, where kids cross regularly to go to Linfrip School and to access the playing fields and park or the play equipment there. I cross that all the time with walking my little dog and stuff, and you got to be watching because the cars are coming down the hill too quickly. The other consideration was in the development, the amount of parking available. And I can only see that with the number of parking stalls available, that a lot of that traffic and those vehicles are going to have to come out of there and park along 212th, which is already full of cars each evening. It's because of the suites, of course, which are necessary. And if you don't have a driveway to leave your car in, and your garage is full of boxes and whatnot, as we often see, the cars are going to come out of that area and park on the other residential streets. I think there needs to be more thought in that regard. Also, as addressed earlier, school availability is already at capacity wherever you look. There's a lack of park area for people to go and walk, and certainly no dog parks available. Our hospital availability is maxing out, and I think we have an opportunity here for some sober second thought before we get ourselves too deep into this when we can't make changes. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Can you provide that as a petition to the
I
clerk?
will.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Next speakers, Your Worship, are Amanda Percival and Matthew Sheen.
Good evening. Amanda Percival, and I live on 83rd Avenue. So, we've lived here for 13 years, and when we first moved in, it was a much different neighborhood. We understood that it would be developed. We always knew that, but to the degree we didn't expect. And now with this new townhome development, it will directly affect us and our children. As this other lady was talking about, our kids play on 83rd Avenue. They play right in front of our house. It's a very scary thing to think about, all of these residents from the townhome driving right into their complex off of 83rd Avenue. So that is the biggest thing that I have to talk to you about today, is the entrance on 83rd Ave. As I said, we used to live here a long time ago, and there was direct access to Glover, and you should have seen the cars racing down all the time. They were racing. I wouldn't even let my son go out on 83rd. Since they closed that off, it's been amazing. We've been happy. Our kids play. They run up and down. Of course, the ball goes out on the road, and they know that they have to look both ways and before they cross the street. But, sometimes it happens, and with people with more dense housing, more traffic, that's a really concern. That's a very big concern for us. So we are proposing not to have that 83rd entrance, because it's just going to completely put our kids at risk. Obviously, we don't want the townhome development at all. Originally, the plan was that it would be single-family homes along 83rd and 212th. And then there was the talk of townhomes in between. Okay, obviously, we're not happy with that. But if this development does go ahead, definitely it should retract back to the single-family homes on 83rd and 212th. That's what our neighborhood is right now. So putting townhomes, sorry, did I blow this mic out? So putting townhomes there would definitely change the whole dynamic of this. We are such a community. All of our neighbors, we all know each other. I bake lots of zucchini bread from my garden for everybody. Our kids play with each other. They run up and down behind our house. Already I have signs out for traffic to be careful, but there's always the people not looking, and so we just have to be careful with our kids. And adding that 83rd entrance that would be really detrimental. There's been a lot of close calls already on 83rd and 211th. 83rd and 212th. Crossing there is just so dangerous. We don't let our kids cross there at all. So that is that's my number one concern. Of course, there's increased traffic, congestion. We've already talked about the schools. In fact, I don't even put my son in Lynn Fripps. We drive half an hour to Cloverdale to a private school. And because Lynn Fripps is so overcrowded, we tried it. It was crazy overcrowded, and now we go to a private school. So that is what people will be forced to do if we don't have room for our children. And we still pay taxes. We still pay taxes for school, even though we can't attend them. So that's my personal experience. Hopefully you guys will really consider it, because I don't know where everybody lives, but if you lived on our street, you sure as heck wouldn't want that entrance there. So thanks for listening to me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
My name is
Hello.
my name is Matthew, and
We can hear. No, the mic will pick it up. Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
my name is Matthew, and my speech is about the
Whereabouts do you live, Matthew?
83rd Avenue.
83rd Avenue. Thank you.
My name is Matthew Sheen, and I'm telling you this. Please don't build the condos across the road, because you're driving all the bunnies out of the field and also bringing coyotes over here, and it's not nice. Anyways, and Lynn Phipps, if you like imagine, so if you build 200 condos or condos, and then Lynn Phipps, my school, I don't know, it will be over capacity. They might actually have to stack portables on top of each other, and then they might cave in, or they might just find another way. And where would you put the stairs? And those bike racks, the bike racks. Imagine if all the kids from the condos drive their bikes to school. It's already I'm not gonna say that. Kind of.
You want some more bike racks at Lynn Phipps?
Yeah, kind of. It's just also I've seen I've one time nearly been hit by a car. I looked both ways and crossing the road, and actually the car was going very fast. It was scary. So maybe speed bumps?
I might be able to help you with that.
Please.
Okay.
Hope you take that in mind.
We certainly will. Thank you very much.
Your Worship, the last speaker on our list is Lisa Rothwetter.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. First of all, I'd like to commend you all on the great work that you're doing to fix the problems in the Willoughby area. Tonight, though, I hope you can help my neighbors and I with our current problem. My name is Lisa Robader, and my home is actually located right on the corner of 83rd and 212th. It's the northwest corner across from the Williams neighborhood plan. Tonight, you've heard the concerns from the speakers, the written letters, and the petitions regarding Qualico trying to deviate from their original plan for our area. To all of us, it's unacceptable to make such a significant change to the neighborhood plan that was just presented to the families who live here not that long ago. The community was involved in and agreed to the original plan and the need for growth in our area. The concerns are real, Mr. Mayor, and all we ask is that you keep the original neighborhood plan in place. Thank you for your time and consideration.
So I have a question, if you don't mind.
Certainly.
When you say original plan, I think it'd be helpful for council for you to clarify that submission. What you mean by stick to the original plan?
Well, it was supposed to be single-family housing on 212th and 83rd. And
So that's what you're referring to there?
correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
that's what we were happy. I mean, imagine if you had presented at that time that there was going to be I'm sorry, not 196, but I think you clarified 176 townhouses. We wouldn't have agreed to that at that time. So surprising us, I'm sorry, was it 2 weeks ago we got notice about this? Yeah, a few of us, not all of us, got the yellow notice. It would have been, we wouldn't have agreed to it at that time. So all we're asking is that you consider the original plan and keep that. And it would make us all pretty happy if you would
Yeah,
look at
so
that.
you're the second person, I think, to specifically mention that interface onto 83rd, and
Right.
it's good to see it here, and I thank you for clarifying that it's considered part of the original plan. You feel yourself and the neighbors have accepted for a long time. Would that be fair?
Yeah, yes, exactly. We were at the meetings. I did the virtual meetings. So yeah, it was just surprising to kind of last minute find that there was going to be a change to that plan. And so here we are.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, I have another question from Council. Councilor Van Popta.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to clarify. So when I look at the application, it actually doesn't really border 212th. Those are different applications.
Yeah, yes.
So the only portion that's actually on 212th is at the very tiny bottom south, yeah, right where the cursor is there.
Yeah.
And then their portion is just a little bit on the top at 83rd. So are you saying if they change those three buildings on 83rd to single family, that would mitigate your concerns for 83rd?
No, my understanding is where I'm located at that intersection, there will be one house at its side facing 212th. I actually face 83rd. Just down from me will be the entrance into the new townhouse development that they're trying to put through. But that, we had fully understood that there would be townhouses, but our understanding was they would be behind the single-family housing 212th, 83rd, and then townhouses behind it, not coming directly off of 83rd, because now they're running right from 83rd to 80th, and that was never brought forward in the plans to start with. There was no entrance into a townhouse unit. It was never coming directly to 83rd at that time.
Ms. Bauer, could you put up the previous slide that was there? I just want to make sure I'm understanding, because when I look at this, if you can blow that up, their application doesn't actually front to 12th. So I just want to make sure that I'm.
Yes, no, that's correct.
So that could still be single family.
Yeah, that is still
Okay.
single family. Sorry, let me clarify. That
Okay.
is still, and I actually will have a house sideways facing my house, and then the townhouses, start right a few houses down in front of my neighbors. So that's the where they're deviating is the townhouse development.
So those three blue buildings on 83rd is what you want to see single family there, right where the cursor is there?
Correct.
Okay. Because 212th could still potentially be single family. We haven't seen what that
212th
is.
is, my understanding is single family.
Okay.
Yes, I sat in on those meetings as well, the last meetings, but the problem is coming down 83rd, and that change there is what we're wanting to talk about.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's the end of the speakers list, Mr. Richardson, correct?
That's the end of the speakers list, Your Worship.
Yeah. So is there any further submissions from the public? And just for a second time, yeah, please come forward. If you wish to speak again, that's fine. We just, the public hearing rules are a little restrictive, so if you're offering additional information, you have a reasonable chance. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I've just wanted to reiterate, because I know I spoke about the entrance off of 83rd, but I'm also in agreement with Lisa, who previously spoke, that single-family homes should be on 83rd. That was what I brought forward earlier. I just wanted to clarify, because I did talk about a whole lot of other things.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah, okay,
You were
great.
the other
And-
speaker I was referring to.
Okay, wonderful. Yes, great. So yeah, that's our main point, and the access road. And I'm just curious, if I may, will this all be on record? Because I didn't send in an email because I wanted to speak, but should I also send in an email?
The public hearing is recorded. Ms. Bauer has recorded your
Okay,
submission
so-
and your key points. If you wish to
No additional,
follow up
okay.
an email, you'd have about a minute to do that.
Yeah, no.
Unfortunately, yeah.
No, that's fine,
Well,
as
but I've
long as
taken-
this is recorded.
I've taken notes, and Ms. Bauer has also recorded your submission.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Please come forward. If there's other submissions from the public on bylaws number 5890 and 5891, please come forward. Yeah.
Hi there. My name is Candace, and I live.
Is it okay to get your last name
Yeah,
for the record?
Candace Blate, and I'm on 83rd Avenue and 212, or 211. Sorry, 211. So we're right on the corner. I have 3 kids, 6, 4, and 1. One goes to Lynn Fripps. The 4-year-old is currently in the preschool at Lynn Fripps, and then my other child will hopefully be going to Lynn Fripps. But my question is, I actually did not receive the yellow card. I only found out about this development from my neighbor Jack, who came by looking at our roses and commented, "Did you hear about this?" I then later asked neighbors on our street, and a few others did not receive the card. It seemed like it might have only gone halfway up 83rd, so I'm just curious as to why.
So we can clarify that for you. I mean, I believe it's people that reside within 100 meters of the boundary of the neighborhood plan. Is that correct, Ms. Bauer? That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the requirement that is outlined within the, is it the Local Government Act, Ms. Bauer, that has that? Maybe you could just clarify. I know it's a bit atypical to clarify, but we could
Yeah,
go
no
ahead.
problem. Yes,
Yeah.
it is in the Local Government Act.
Okay, yeah.
It is something that, to clarify your submission, that concerning that you didn't receive this, that the Township of Langley didn't go above and beyond what's required as part of the Local Government Act.
Yeah, no, and thank you. I guess it's just a little surprising because this definitely would affect our living and direct, the school across our street and the crossing of our children. So I would have loved to be informed. So I definitely, I am on the same page as Lisa and many of the other speakers, as that the original plan it just sounds a lot easier to stomach at this point. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other submissions from the public? For a second time, are there any other submissions from the public on bylaw number 5890 and 5891? And for a third time, are there any submissions from the public, bylaws 5890 and 5891? Seeing none, with that, I'll close the public hearing. We've already heard from the proponent. So with that, we'll move on to item C4, Mr. Richardson. And just for those that the bylaws, as we mentioned in the introduction, these bylaws will be considered at the next meeting of council. Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Worship. The subject to Gloucester Industrial Park Plan and rezoning bylaw amendments pertain to lands in the 5500 block of 268, 272, and 275 streets. The 91.92 acre site is designated golf course of the Gloucester Industrial Park Plan. Gloucester Industrial Park Plan Amendment Bylaw 5885 designates the land comprehensive service and general industrial, accommodating service and general industrial uses subject to dedication of watercourse conservation areas and stormwater detention facilities, and includes the subject site as a development permit area. Rezoning Bylaw 5886 rezones the site from Rural Zone RU1 and Rural Golf Course Zone RU10 to Comprehensive Development Zone 185, accommodating general industrial uses, open space conservation areas, and public utility uses. Staff recommends support of Gloucester Industrial Park Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 5885 and rezoning Bylaw 5886, subject to 13 conditions listed on page 10 of Council's agenda. Your Worship, a total of 253 notices were mailed out, 14 written submissions have been received, and we have 13 individuals noted on the speakers list. The first two are Lisa Dreves and Cheryl Weens, Your Worship.
Can we get that first name again, Ms. Richardson?
Lisa Dreves, Dreves.
Lisa here? Oh, Lisa, great, thanks.
I actually have slides, if that's okay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. So my name is Lisa Dreves. I'm the president of the Langley Field Naturalists, and we're celebrating our 50th year this year, and I can't believe we are still having to say, please protect Langley's natural assets. The information that was sent out to the public had a pretty poor aerial photo. So before you is the 2021 aerial photo through the Township of Langley geosource mapping system, along with the Township of Langley's watercourse classification system that shows the red-coated streams, which are fish-bearing streams or local salmon. We have cutthroat trout and coho salmon in this area. To the best of my abilities, I put on the proposed property lines. Those are in blue, with the blue dotted line is the restrictive covenant on the westernmost property. So back when development first started here, oh, sorry, my apologies. There's a few areas of concern that you can see now that you have a brighter aerial photo compared to the very dark one that was in the public, available to the public. So back in 1994, development had just started in Gloucester, and you can see there was a great deal of beaver ponds in the area as well as other wetlands. There was a very large population of beaver in the area, providing a great deal of detainment of water and allowing for a lot of infiltration for local farms. Even further back in 1973, this is Gloucester Estates in the lower right, facing west into Langley. And this was still part of the ALR. 75% of the Township of Langley is in the ALR. And those lands are protected for food security, while a lot of our agricultural landowners do steward the land beautifully. The purpose of the ALR is not to protect our natural assets. 25% or the remaining 25% is what we can try to protect here in the Township of Langley. And that's not very much land. So when this land was pulled out and work started happening on Gloucester Estates, this is the application for the environmental review to Jean Cook, who was a habitat officer with the Ministry of Environment, Lands and Parks at the time, June 8th, 1999. So the mitigation or compensation components of this project, being Gloucester Estates, when combined with the development proposed for the Poppy Estates Golf Course in the southwest and southeast quadrants, which are the properties that we are looking at today, offsets its impacts on site, provides fish access to newly constructed fish habitat. As such, no off-site compensation habitat is required. So what this is saying is that because of the work that Gloucester Estates is going to be doing to provide fish habitat within Gloucester Estates, as well as the very large, what was then proposed, the Poppy Estates Golf Course, they didn't have to do work outside of that in order to compensate for all of the habitat loss that would be on the property, namely those beaver dams, beaver ponds, and infiltration areas, as mentioned before. So that when combined, I've highlighted it. So I've been told there's about $14 million up for grabs. I really wonder how much is left after infrastructure has been put in for the new development, how much to be able to bring utilities to the area, the staff time that's going to take now and into the future, any compensation for our farmers downstream, because as I mentioned before, the ALR is very important in Langley, and this creek runs through a great deal of farmland lower down. And of course, we're losing a lot of ecosystem services if these lands are pulled out and put into industrial. So I just want to close to say that the Beatty Group, they wants to renege on a commitment that they had to keep these lands as a community amenity and as compensation for the habitat loss that they've incurred over the last 25 years or more. And so I'm hoping that you guys will be their conscience and refuse to rezone this land and protect it into the future as it was supposed to be and promised back in the 90s. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't see any questions from council, so thank you very much. Next speaker.
Oh, is that going for me? Oh, okay. I think I have a sorry, video for this one. Yeah. Here we go. I don't actually want it to start right away. Good evening again. My name is Cheryl Weens, and as you are aware, I live in the Willoughby neighborhood of Langley. So if I could leave you with just one word from this presentation tonight, it would be the word biophilia. Biophilia is the theory that we as humans have an innate connection with nature. And in recent years, an increasing number of studies have found that experiences in and of nature can be very beneficial for human health and well-being. A significant portion of that benefit is due to the positive aesthetic nature of nature, or in other words, its beauty. While there are many reasons to save the West Creek wetlands that I'm sure you're going to hear a lot about tonight, other than beauty, I do believe beauty is one reason, and a very good reason, to save this land. I wish we could be holding this public hearing at the wetlands tonight. I think it would be much harder to vote to pave over any portion of it if you were immersed in the beauty of this area. If you could hear the grasses blowing in the wind or the birds chirping in the trees, if you could see a deer chewing on some leaves in the distance or a family of ducks quietly paddling by. But since that isn't the case, I would like to play you this video taken by Dave Benningfield in February of this year instead. I'll conclude my remarks this evening by asking you, Mayor and Council, to please vote against this rezoning application and vote to keep the West Creek wetlands beautiful. Thank you.
I have a question from Council. Councilor Richter.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Weens. I was wondering if you could go back to the very first picture in your video there. And, yeah, so that whole area, is that all going to be filled in and lost?
No, not all of it. Some of it is being turned over to the township, but what we call wetlands, the township and BD like to look at as detention ponds, and they undervalue that land. And they propose to disturb it and expand those detention ponds before turning it over, which of course would do enormous damage to the habitat there.
Okay.
Yeah, and then, so there are claims that, the wetlands themselves are being protected, but when you develop closer and closer to a wetland, you start to starve it of the water it needs to be a wetland. And so already development in this area is closer than the guidelines that exist for developing around wetlands in order to ensure they remain healthy and remain wetlands. We're already encroaching on those boundaries. So to get even closer and develop about a third of this area, we don't know exactly what the impacts of that will be, but I can guarantee you they'll be negative.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Van-Popte?
Yeah, one of the slides caught my attention. It said that in 2023 that township was dewatering. Could you provide where you got that information from, and through your worship to staff, if you can corroborate whether we were dewatering or not?
For us, this issue, we don't debate the submission.
Okay.
At this point, you'd be able to clarify that if you wished with staff when the bylaws are under consideration on the floor. It wouldn't be here to debate it with the. It'd only be to clarify the submission if you wish to do that.
Am I allowed to ask where they got that information, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it wouldn't be for staff to debate the submission.
So I am, I can tell you I have talked to individuals who have good reason to be in the know, who have witnessed township staff, who tell me that they have witnessed township staff, managing beaver in the area. Which is concerning because if you go onto the township's website, you'll see that the township claims to have a policy that it doesn't do beaver management on privately owned land. But eyewitnesses tell a different story. And I have seen the breached dams, and I do know that there are pond levelers and things like that on the property. So I don't have video or photo evidence or anything like that, but
no, I'm not. Sorry, and I should have clarified. I'm not questioning the beaver dams. I'm just when you use the term dewatering, it's got different connotations in different industries. So I wanted to understand what you were talking about with dewatering.
Gotcha. So I think what is meant by the dewatering there is that the beaver dams are being managed in such a way as to lower the water levels, right? Because the beavers dam it up, the water raises, and then in this last late winter, early spring, water was at an all-time low, and there were a number of breached beaver dams, and it seemed very suspicious timing. And so that is what we mean by dewatering in this case. So that might not be,
So it's not water removal, it's just.
Yeah, it's just breaching the beaver dams in order for the water to go elsewhere.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your submission. Okay. Yeah, thanks. Next speaker.
Next two speakers, Your Worship, is Dr. Christine Bishop and Lynn Perrin.
One? No, it's this one. Slide up. Let's go to the top. Good evening. My name is Christine Bishop. I live at 657 202 Street in Langley. And I'd like to start by introducing you to this study that was published just a couple of weeks ago on the concern of the loss of wildlife around the world. And if you're reading this slide completely, you'll see that there's concern about climate change, but the authors point out that in the case of the modern biodiversity crisis, the major threat to biodiversity is direct habitat destruction. Just to give you some statistics here from that paper, you can see that in the red, virtually all the species are declining. And even though you might look at it and say, well, it's pretty good news about insects, the reality is that insects form an important basis to the food web. And when we lose those, we lose a lot of things that we, as humans, value, straight through to mammals and our own living situation. So tonight I'd like to remind you about the various strategies that the Township of Langley has, and I feel that they need to adhere to when considering this proposal. So 2008 Wildlife Habitat Strategy, highlighting some things out of it, identifying, preserving, restoring natural and environmentally sensitive areas, including wetlands, ensuring that land management processes are environmentally sensitive, promote community participation, and protect our water resources. And in 2019, the township declared a climate emergency, and that the township will work through to tackle causes and climate change through actions to cut carbon pollution. The community forest management strategy, clear direction for protection of preservation and planting of trees and forests. And finally, your own sustainability charter. And in that case, again, building a legacy for future generations. And I feel that this proposal should be voted against because it flies in the face of all of these different strategies and the charters that exist for our township. I'd also like to remind you that I think we're all aware that local governments have a very direct impact on habitat preservation, but also habitat destruction. And here's just a clip from a document working with the provincial government and reminding us that local governments regulate the land use on much of the private property, and what you do and say makes a huge difference. And that's why people are here tonight, to speak directly to you about the impacts of this proposal. I'd also like to again remind you of this document here and its link. Take a look at it. It's produced by the province, but it speaks to habitat preservation in local areas. Specifically, this is the document that identifies that in order to preserve a wetland properly, you should be looking at a 3-to-1 ratio. So if you have 1 hectare surface area for a wetland, you should be preserving 3 hectares of upland habitat around it. And when people look at this, particularly people in some levels of government, they'd say, well, we have our 30-meter setback, and that's what we work with. That's the legal ease that we deal with versus these guidelines. And if you read this document, it's actually very thoughtful and points out the value of what they're saying about this and many other things regarding wetland buffers and preservation. But back to the 30 meters. I'd like to remind you that 30 meters is the minimum that should be protected. And when you think about all the different aspects of development, and if you said to yourself, well, every stream should get 30 meters, large, small, one size fits all. That just doesn't make any common sense, especially when you have a wetland the size of this one and its significance as part of the headwaters of West Creek. So finally, I'd just like to show you this map again and to highlight the kinds of impacts that this proposal will bring. Yes, some of the wetland will be preserved, but 39 acres won't be. That's direct habitat destruction on red-coated streams for salmon. Wetlands and surrounding habitats are the core to the biodiversity and hydrology of the creeks in the area. Because of the way that this proposal is brought forward, all these different areas that are going to be developed, is going to create a lot of fragmentation, reducing the quality of the remaining habitat. There'll be loss of carbon capture, loss of cooling capacity in our township, a climate change impact, of course. There will be pollution during and after construction, whether or not it's from road tire, the breakdown of tires in terms of polluting salmon streams and the wetland, sedimentation, and this is, of course, the sort of thing that occurs during and ongoing. The more industrial development you put around this wetland, the more impacts there will be in reducing the quality of the salmon streams and the wetland itself. And finally, in any kind of development like this, there's the introduction of invasive species that compete with the native plants there and reduce the quality of the wetland as a site for biodiversity. And I'd just like to point out, as it says on the bottom of this slide, 4 of the top 5 threats to biodiversity, as recognized by the United Nations, are checked off the list on this proposal. Thank you.
Mr. Richardson, next speaker.
Thank you, Worship. The next 2 speakers are Lynn Parent and Romley Kavanaugh.
Great, please go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a PowerPoint. Do I set it up or do you? Thank you. My name is Lynn Perrin, and in my submission I said I'm from planet Earth, from the Lower Fraser River watershed, and from Abbotsford, BC. Council, you've all received the documents on this PowerPoint, and I hope that you carefully consider them. I have sourced everything that I say in my submission to you. So I probably have more knowledge of the history of this development than anyone else in this room. I lived at Nathan Avenue and the border of Langley and what was then Matsqui in 1977 when this was first proposed. And I attended many Central Fraser Valley Regional District meetings in regard to this development. At the time, the developer, which was, the developer had purchased the land from Grosvenor Lang. Grosvenor Lang had owned it for about 20 years and had left the land fallow. There was no farming going on at the time of the application to the ALC to rezone the 600 plus acres. And one thing that was committed to at the time was a green space, which became the golf course. But it was initially proposed as a green space because of all of the impact that the industrial buildings and roads would have on the wetlands. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to say this. It's like deja vu all over again. There was so much controversy and conflict in that original development that it actually took years and court cases and the Environmental Land Use Committee to get it off the ground. And at the time, the rezoning was actually based on a fabricated soil analysis by 2 professional agrologists who ended up losing their professional status and their license over that fabrication of that soil analysis. So now we have, we're coming forward in 2017. I'm going to talk about I'm going to talk about Beatty. I'm going to talk about Enviro West, because that is where the council's report for this and recommendations for this originated, was from them. So in 2017, 48th Avenue and 275th Street, 100 meters of West Creek was put in a tunnel 2 years after Beatty says the DFO permit had expired. And yet they used that permit for that, putting the creek in that tunnel. Interestingly, I've tried to find where the council actually approved that. I have yet to find it, even though I've done a Freedom of Information request to the council. It appears that the work was actually done before council formally approved it. Now we come to 2022. Eva Logistics on 48th Avenue and 275th Street. There was infilling of the riparian area 7 years after the DFO permit expired. The infill was also done in March, which is outside of the least risk window for work in and about fish habitat. October of 2022, Beatty submits a plan to the Township of Langley, committing to consultation with First Nations and environmental groups. They have not used any fish biologists. They have not used any hydrologist experts. There was no public information meeting prior to first and second reading, even though Beatty committed to consulting with groups like mine, West Creek Awareness, and Indigenous people. In 2023, the 60th Avenue initial application to DFO completely eliminated Nathan Creek, which is a red-listed creek and goes from the wetland into Abbotsford. Also, the DFO, that DFO letter of advice, it wasn't a permit, it was a letter of advice, was expired before it came to council. The letter of advice was expired. Now we have February 1st, 2023, which is when the beaver dams that you've already heard about were breached. They were lowered to the creek bed, which is not advisable at all. Yes, there was dewatering, and this is in a drought. And the excuse used was, oh, well, this is for flood mitigation in a time of drought. Now, how we found out about this? A Freedom of Information application. There's so many documents that we have seen you have never seen. Never. All you get is reports from your staff. So Beatty tells EBB consultants, the people who do the beaver work in this township, that there are no fish in that area, no salmon in that area. Well, a DFO letter disagrees with that. DFO in 2019 said the wild coho in that area are really important to the coho of this province. So now we have April 2023, and this council passes a piece of policy that allows a qualified professional agrologist to determine watercourse classifications. Now, the Beatty report is rife with the term man-made. You know why they know that? Because they made them, because they had to, because they were compensatory habitat that was to be left First of all, DFO had to inspect it, and they had to ensure that it was properly done and would flourish forever, and that Beatty was to leave it undisturbed in perpetuity. Now that means forever in any definition I've seen in perpetuity. So I've shown you the maps. You've got them attached here. I don't know how to move to the next page. Oh dear, okay. See, these are all the maps and all of the work that was done, all the planting that was done. DFO required that they do this. And it's in how many plants had to be planted. Here's a picture of some of the early work that was done. Here it says constructed wetland. Now, Beatty today would call that man-made. So, Gloucester shall ensure that the compensatory habitat is functioning as intended for the lifetime of Gloucester Industrial Estates. If at any time Gloucester becomes aware that compensatory habitat is not functioning as intended, Gloucester shall, not may, but shall, carry out any works which are necessary to enable the compensatory habitat to function as designed. If Gloucester transfers its interest in Gloucester Industrial Estates and transferee assumes obligations, this authorization informs satisfactory DFO and relieves them of these obligations. So these are still obligations of Gloucester today. Therefore, Council, as our petition, which has almost reached 1,000 since the 23rd of May, says, therefore, we the petitioners demand that the West Creek headwater wetland remain undisturbed compensatory habitat within the Township of Langley, Metro Vancouver Regional District in perpetuity. Thank you.
Thank you, too. I don't have any questions for council.
Here's the other petitions.
That'd be great. You leave that with the clerk. Mr. Richardson, the next speaker, please.
Your worship, next two speakers are Romley Kavanagh and Britt Gardner. Just been informed that Romley is not present.
But I do have a statement from her that I'll read later.
Okay, next speaker, please.
Britt Gardner, your worship.
Hello, my name is Britt Gardner. I'm a resident of Fort Langley. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I stand before you today to express my opposition to the rezoning application at the West Creek Headwaters in Gloucester Estates. I want to register my agreement with the other submissions that cite ecological concerns. Due to time constraints, I'll refrain from repeating those arguments. Instead, I will address the economic value of these lands under their current zoning as a community amenity and the hidden cost to our community if we deviate from that zoning by approving this application. I want to remind Council that the entire 90-acre parcel is currently zoned as a community amenity, a designation of critical value to the community. Originally encompassing 128 acres, decisions made by past councils have gradually reduced this amenity. Now, the present council is being asked to diminish it by half, leaving only 55. The fact that these amenity and conservation lands are privately owned in the first place stems from the outdated notions that are reflected in the text of our Gloucester Community Plan. As a result, despite the current zoning, these lands have been subject to speculation for decades. Although a golf course may not seem like the most relevant amenity for our community, particularly in this specific location, it is a community amenity nonetheless. Further, it is the existing zoning that holds incredible value for our community in its current form. I caution and urge this council against any rezoning resulting in the loss of community amenity status at this stage. Land acquisition costs for amenities and preservation of our community's assets through our powers of zoning must be taken into account. As mentioned, environmental consultation has not been conducted to assess the cumulative impacts on West Creek resulting from the continuous degradation and industrial development at the headwaters. The relevant local bodies, such as our watershed groups and local societies, have not been engaged in any proposed changes to the community plan that impact West Creek or the conservation areas. These considerations should be a part of a modern community planning process. The Gloucester Community Plan, however, was created in the late 1980s and has not been updated since then. Every aspect of the plan is outdated, including industrial form, sprawl perpetuation, language about conservation areas, lack of transit planning, inadequate planning for climate change and stormwater, and most importantly, the lack of public access to community amenity and conservation lands under private and corporate control. Considering such a significant removal from these community amenity lands, wetland areas, and buffer zones absolutely does not comply with the spirit or recommendations of our approved climate, forest, and sustainability strategies. Moreover, it puts our municipality at risk of economic damages down the line that far exceed the meager millions provided by the developer as community amenity contributions. Furthermore, rezoning these lands would create a substantial and permanent increase in the land value, rendering it perpetually inaccessible by all except corporate interests. Under the current zoning as a community amenity, the assessed value of these 90 acres was, according to BC Assessment, $10 million until 2022, as per BC Assessment. However, the market value for industrial land today is approximately as high as $8 million an acre, resulting in a total land value of approximately $300 million if the rezoning is granted by mayor and council. Are we willing to hand the developer hundreds of millions of dollars in land value in exchange for a small CAC contribution? This is an unjust proposition. I suggest that the mayor, council, and staff have once again been deceived by a wealthy land speculator who will finally see himself handsomely rewarded after decades of waiting at the expense of our community and our environment. But it doesn't have to be this way. Acquiring this land publicly at fair market value under its current zoning, rather than its speculative value, would provide us with long-term economic value that rezoning today would cost us forever. If council permits this rezoning, then such an acquisition will never again be possible by the public. I urge mayor and council to consider this option permitted under existing legislation. Additionally, the proponent should be made aware of the federal government's Ecological Gifts Program, which offers tax receipts for gifting the entire parcel. For a developer that is a billion-dollar private corporation, this may be a valuable and preferable alternative. Evaluating these options and considering the public interest will require time, diligence, and consultation. If you are unsure, I urge you to err on the side of caution and vote according to your conscience. We do not owe rezoning to any speculator. Lastly, I remind you that you were elected by many to bring about change. Yet what we are witnessing here is more of the same. We have presented you with a petition bearing nearly 1,000 signatures. Major news outlets have covered the issue extensively since the signs went up just weeks ago, and various groups and individuals have directly provided expert feedback, input, concerns, and objections. I implore you to listen to the public feedback and reject this rezoning. Thank you for your attention.
Mr. Richardson, next speaker.
Thank you, Worship. Next, two speakers, Sarah Rush and Laura Pandolfo.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Sarah Rush, Hazelmere resident on the Langley border. I didn't actually expect to be here back again so soon, but here I am. When I saw this come up on social media, actually, and also on the news the other morning while I was waiting to do a competition, I thought, wow, okay, so looked into it, and it's in my sphere of interest, being a retired dietitian and a supporter of agriculture and anti-climate change, so mitigating climate change with preserving biodiversity. So I've come along to make some comments. Mainly they are some why and when questions for you. The first one, why, when the effects of climate change are here, large and real, and the known mitigating factor is preserving biodiversity and green space, do governing bodies keep allowing companies to develop green space? These are rhetorical questions, I have to say. Why reward companies whose profit model is developing green space instead of encouraging development of brownfield sites? Why keep condoning urban sprawl into rural zoned areas? And this is a rural zoned area, and this is urban sprawl. Why is the Township of Langley even considering paving over what other countries and cities would consider a perfect, ideal natural scenario? Natural wetlands in amongst a developed area, lessening flood risks, allowing for natural water flows, allowing for green space. The list goes on. So this development, while leaving some of the wetland fragments it, destroying the natural flow of the water under the ground and destroying the natural flow of animal movements. It seems like the area of natural space and wetland will reduce by some 40%, which is massive. We just keep chipping away until it really loses its integrity and benefit. There is a plan even apparently to try and relocate one of the streams. This is not just a stream. Many of the streams being discussed here are Class A salmon streams, and they're just being filled in. Nature doesn't work like that. How do you know that this will not be the tipping point in this area? Unlike engineering studies, when people bring products to market, they do testing to see when is the failure. They see how far we can go with the product, like an airplane, how far can the tip be on the airplane before there is no way of retrieving the flight and it will crash. These are all things that are studied. With this, you have no way of knowing what the tipping point is until you've gone over it, until it's too late. So this shouldn't go ahead just based on the tipping point theory. But anyway, then on to some of the points that have been raised a little bit. When will council stop selling out the livability and sustainability of the Lower Mainland? And it's not just the Township of Langley that are considering this proposal. It seems to be the extra tax dollars keep coming up as a reason to do something. It's happening all over the Lower Mainland. We need to be thinking far ahead, not just for now, not just for the few coins in the coffers now, but what's going to happen later. Decisions of this importance shouldn't be made just on a monetary consideration. As for the economic growth justification, I hear so much about industrial land being needed for jobs, but so much developed land just ends up being warehousing. We just end up being a drop-off point for foreign-made goods, or office space, both of which could be built on brownfield sites. This is such a wasteful development. Whilst other countries and cities, and even in Richmond nearby, build taller industrial buildings, build vertical, densify commercial space, concentrate on brown sites in order to preserve what precious open land is left, here TOL is being asked to consider building not just on natural land, but on wetlands, even more special, even more rare, even more necessary to the future. It is so many degrees worse. So please, I ask, do not proceed with this. It is the opposite direction to sustainable planning. It does not align with any of the Township of Langley's sustainability charter. Just slightly on script, you've all been sent an Economist article on this, sponge cities, where province in China just went gung-ho, let's build, let's make some money, and then it's like, oh dear, that was a mistake. And then they've had to go back and build exactly what you have here. You already have it. Don't fix it, it's not broken. Leave it as it is, please. So thank you very much for your time, and I really hope that you will keep this as community land, preserved as a biodiversity area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Just going to set up my slide.
Great.
Are there any other USB ports? It's actually on top of the desk. Oh, this one? Yep. Just before I begin, for context, this is a photo of the wetland. Good evening. My name is Laura Pandolfo. I am a member of Climate
Crisis Langley Action Partners and a resident of Walnut Grove in the Township of Langley. As mayor and as council, you are meant to represent the interests of the Langley community. I would like to remind you that our community is not solely made up of people, but of non-human animals as well. Today, I am here to speak on their behalf. The headwaters of West Creek are a biodiversity hotspot here in Langley, home to a myriad of wildlife and the stage for many wonders of nature. Generations of beaver, our national animal and a keystone species, live and raise their young in that wetland. Other native mammals like white-tailed deer, muskrat, raccoon, and coyote also depend on it. Migratory and non-migratory birds alike feed, nest, and raise their hatchlings there, including our provincial bird, the Steller's jay. These headwaters are also a nursery for young coho salmon, and West Creek itself is described by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada as one of the most important streams south of the Fraser for fish. Any development and disruption to the headwaters would inevitably affect the creek itself and the crucial role it plays for the life cycle of salmon and cutthroat trout. Additionally, green spaces like this provide an important corridor for wildlife, including large species like black bear, helping to avoid incidents of human-wildlife conflict. The headwaters of West Creek are already an ecological refuge, one with a growing significance in our ever-changing climate, and you have the power to protect it for generations of all types to come. Action on a municipal level is some of the most direct and therefore most impactful, especially in regards to environmental issues. And so I end with this. Please do the right thing for the headwaters of West Creek and all the lives that depend on them, and refuse this rezoning application. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Worship, next two speakers, Lionel Faldolfo and Diane Kask.
I have the computer. Dear Mayor Woodward and Councillor, I hope you don't mind if I sit down.
We do not. Please do.
So I can?
Of
Thank
course, yes.
you. Thank you.
There's another microphone there.
I can't.
You don't have to.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
The screen is too high. I can't see anybody. All right. So my name is Lionel Pandolfo. I am a resident of the township, and I live in Walnut Grove. I am a university professor, climate scientist, and the president of the Climate Crisis Langley Action Partners. And I'm here to talk about this rezoning application with respect to climate change. And so I think some of these issues have been mentioned before, but I want to remind you that the wetlands are a very important ecosystem, one of the most important in the world. Well, some of the services they provide is absorb excess water during heavy rain, preventing flooding. They use they filter waste and purify water. They are locations where there's a large variety of plant life and animal life, and they also participate in economic activities by being a place where salmon and trout grow, especially in that particular wetland. Now, with respect to CO2 capture, carbon dioxide capture, which is my main interest, is that if you look at wetlands with respect to man-made changes to land cover or land use, they always result, these changes, always man-made changes, always result in a decrease of CO2 capture. So the decrease goes from 70 to 450%. It's a wide range, but this results from meta-analysis looking at studies all over the world with different wetlands and different types of changes in land cover. But in any case, all changes in land cover made by humans have always resulted in the disappearance of carbon capture by the wetlands, by the new man-made cover. Also, for wetlands, because wetlands have they are a place where organic matter buries by sinking to the bottom. They have anaerobic conditions, the soil, so there's no oxidation of things in there. And so they're a great place for sequestration of carbon dioxide. They actually sequester more than 10 times what forests actually sequester. This is quite amazing. And finally, with respect to CO2 sequestration, if you actually drain wetlands, what happens is that there's now oxygenation because the anaerobic conditions have disappeared. And this oxidation turns wetlands from a sequester of carbon dioxide to an emitter of carbon dioxide. And in Canada, this amounts to, for the drained wetlands in Canada, this amounts to 5 megatons of carbon dioxide per year. Now, this is not a small number. If you look at the US, for instance, their number is 6.9 megaton of carbon dioxide per year that is emitted by these drained wetlands. Now, also, to give you another perspective, this amount represents about 10% of the emissions from the agricultural sector, and 10% also of the industrial processes sector. So it's a big component, and we should be careful in how we deal with wetlands. And in terms of carbon sequestration, they play a vital role in our country and over the world. Finally, I'd like to show you that the amount of wetlands since the beginning of the 20th century have gone down by 42%. And if you go back even more, so let's say at the beginning of when things started to change in North America, which is 1700, the number of the percentage of wetland loss is 80%. So whatever we have left, we need to protect. We can't just say, oh, well, let's get rid of this little tiny amount of wetlands here. Because if you say, well, we'll keep a small amount, well, Ms. Dreves gave a historical perspective at the beginning, and she showed that, in the 1970s, even the 1990s, these wetlands were larger, covered a larger area. And the more we advance in time now, they get smaller and smaller. Now, at some point, you say, well, this rezoning, we're going to keep some wetlands. However, what you must realize is that if I put a collar around your neck and I tighten it so that you can only breathe 50% of the air that you can normally breathe, you'll be laying in your bed not doing anything because you won't be able to. And this is exactly what this rezoning is bringing to these wetlands, is to strangle them up to the point that, yeah, we have a wetland, but it doesn't work as a wetland. And sadly enough, we should protect them, not transform them. And we could find other uses for them. We can turn this area into a park, interpretive park, where we can have families come and go, and we can have bird watching setups. And so we could actually have other uses for these wetlands than covered by pavement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. You should take this.
Hello, my name is Diane Kask. I live in Aldergrove. Honorable Mayor and Council, there have been so many speakers today with so much more knowledge than me, but I still would like to just reiterate what everyone's saying. I'm here today to speak on behalf of the trees and wetland in Gloucester's Industrial Park. I want to impress upon you the value of the trees and containment pond, which is now a thriving marsh and coho rearing pond. I have already sent emails, and I'm sure you've read the write-ups in the Aldergrove Star, the Langley Advance Times, the Vancouver Sun, and watched CTV and CBC. All of this media news coverage helps to signify the importance of the golf course lands. If you haven't already, I urge you to go out and walk around the golf course lands and imagine what they would look like after the trees are cut down and big machines have gone in and enlarged the containment ponds. West Creek headwaters will be hurt. Please vote against approving this application by the Beauty Group to rezone the golf course lands. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Richardson, you speaker.
Thank you, Worship. Next two speakers is Antoinette Guilloux and Ann Wright.
Good evening, Mayor Woodward and Council. My name is Antoinette Guilloux, and I live on 256th Street. I've lived there for over 30 years in Aldergrove. I'm here this evening as a concerned citizen because I think that passing these rezoning requests with the resulting loss of nearly 37 acres that encompass fish-bearing streams, plant and wildlife habitat in the West Creek headwaters and wetlands would be a short-sighted decision, not only environmentally, but economically. We are all aware that extreme weather events are occurring ever more frequently. Here in Langley, we have already had samplers of these events: heat dome, atmospheric river, toxic smoke, and air quality warnings. Why would we even consider blacktopping wetland areas? We know that among other benefits, they act as carbon sinks and filter toxins. A clip on the CBC yesterday informs us that Langley Township, quote, cares about environmental stewardship and strives to find a balance between providing economic growth and jobs while preserving the environment and sensitive areas. Degrading these unique headwaters and wetlands is an odd approach to environmental stewardship. And unless we have evaluated the dollar value of keeping them intact, how do we know what weight they carry vis-a-vis jobs that may not be available in the future? Without this information, how can we talk about balance? Rather than severing sections of land from this ecosystem, which seems akin to cutting off someone's limbs and saying, they'll manage, wouldn't it make more sense to view the entire area as a natural asset? By that I mean taking account of the dollar value of preserving this wetland in its entirety. According to a 2021 BC Chamber of Commerce article, many municipalities are factoring in the value of natural areas, such as wetlands, for the, quote, vital municipal service delivery benefits they offer, such as stormwater management and drinking water filtration. Accounting frameworks have been established to incorporate the value of ecological assets. For example, the International Institute of Sustainable Development, the Waterloo University Intact Centre on Climate Adaptation, and the Insurance Bureau of Canada developed such a framework. And in 2022, the Intact Centre published its report, quote, Getting Nature on the Balance Sheet, recognizing the financial value provided by natural assets in a changing climate. One of the reasons I mention this Intact Centre's report is that it lists Langley Township as a local government in BC where this type of valuation has already been undertaken. Indeed, Langley Township's adopted climate action strategy, which I assume we're all familiar with, lists 3 action items, GE 6, 7, and 8, with regards to natural asset evaluation. This is good news, but it brings up a number of questions for me. Are asset inventories being undertaken, or will they be undertaken for the West Creek headwater and wetlands area? Has the Township of Langley weighed the long-term environmental and economic costs of decreasing these community amenity lands against the long-term environmental and economic benefits of keeping them intact? My request, Mayor Woodward and Council, is that you pause with respect to the rezoning of this decision and truly evaluate the short-term benefits of degrading these wetlands versus the very real environmental and financial benefits that this thriving wetland offers when viewed and managed as an intact ecosystem and natural asset. The Township of Langley has had the good fortune to have these unique headwaters and wetlands within its boundaries. And in these times of extreme weather events, we cannot afford to lose any part of it. I'll finish with a quote from the Chamber of Commerce article I mentioned earlier. Quote, "One of the most pressing threats facing Canada and the world is the degradation of nature exacerbated by climate change." Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Your Worship, last two speakers on the list are Ann Wright and Kirk Robertson.
Ann Wright here? Kirk Robertson? Oh, Ann Wright? Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor Woodward and members of the council. My name is Ann Wright. I live in Aldergrove on 252nd Street. I am here this evening to speak both as a Climate Crisis Langley member, a resident of Aldergrove, and also as an advocate for public health. I have deep concerns regarding the proposed rezoning of our West Creek headwaters. I firmly believe that such a decision would be unwise and short-sighted. As many of you already know, Canada has one of the highest per capita rates of emissions in the world. It is clear that reducing these emissions is challenging and requires significant effort and systemic change. As an example is our transportation system. However, we have one natural solution sitting right in our own backyard, and that is the West Creek wetlands. Our wetlands have the potential to sequester vast amounts of carbon, and all that is required of us to do is to leave them alone. And they will do all the beneficial things that we've heard of tonight. Unfortunately, any disturbance such as dredging ponds can release this carbon into the atmosphere, thereby increasing our CO2 emissions. We must not ignore the climate mitigation that our wetlands provide. Furthermore, rezoning any part of these wetlands for unspecified industrial use can have a detrimental impact on the remaining wetlands and the habitats they support. Increased CO2 emissions and industrialization have now been linked by public health groups and physician organizations to an increase in respiratory and cardiovascular disease, leading to a rise in hospitalizations. It is crucial that we take these findings seriously and consider the long-term consequences of our decision. Having listened to the presentations tonight, I am compelled to question the wisdom of approving this rezoning proposal. If after tonight, you as a town council are still leaning towards replacing even a portion of the West Creek headwaters, I urge you to at least seriously consider deferring this decision until you have thoroughly consulted with First Nations, community groups, economic and environmental specialists. Their expertise and perspectives will provide valuable insights into the potential impacts of your decision. I am not aware of any expert consultations having been completed at this time. I also strongly recommend reaching out and visiting this wetland and also other communities that have dealt with similar issues, such as the Chim wetlands near Chilliwack. By doing so, you can learn from their experiences and gain a broader understanding of the potential economic and environmental benefits of preserving these ecological treasures. Taking these steps for me will demonstrate your dedication to good governance and respect for the health of your constituents. It is our collective responsibility to safeguard our environment and protect the health and well-being of our community. I implore you to consider these points carefully and make an informed decision that prioritizes the long-term sustainability of this town. I would like to conclude with a quote from the Government of Canada titled, "Canada's Nature-Based Climate Solutions," quote, "Once abundant through Canada, wetlands are now increasingly scarce in populated areas. Approximately 70% have been lost in southern areas, and up to 95% have been lost in densely populated areas. I truly hope that West Creek headwaters are not going to be added to this statistic." Thank you for your attention. Also, one quick other thing, you received a poem by the granddaughter of the Lightfoots, and I just recommend you read it. It's from a 14-year-old youth begging us to save the wetlands and the animals that live in it. Thank you.
Mr. Robertson? Mr. Robertson, yeah, come forward, please. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Kirk Robertson, and I live in Fernridge, but for 45 years I lived on 84th Avenue between West Creek and Nathan Creek. And as a member of Glen Valley Watershed Society, I hope I adequately express the concerns of that group tonight. There is an idea that so many people have tried to convey to council, the media, and the public at large. Though only part of the headwaters of West Creek will be developed, all parts will be impacted by the development. The changes to the watercourses on the developed part will impact the watercourses in the so-called conserved area. You cannot place industrial buildings and paved surfaces right beside a forest and wetland and not have a detrimental effect. Enhancing and expanding the stormwater facilities in the so-called protected area will cause damage to the protected area. Habitat fragmentation will affect the survival of species and biodiversity on the site. In short, decision makers need to take a holistic approach and see that we tread lightly. To believe otherwise would be like saying that a jackhammer is a suitable tool for a brain surgeon. As things stand, you will be making decision about this special place blindly. We do not know how great the damage will be. We do not know what the state of spawning grounds will be once the development is completed. We do not know if it will be changes in water flow, the work on the stormwater facilities, or fragmented habitat. Future pollution that will do the greatest damage. We do not know as much as we should about the actual ecology of the site, what species are present, and how they all interact. We know some, but not as much as we should. Without the benefit of a cumulative effects evaluation, a biodiversity assessment, or any other kind of environmental assessment, you were being asked to make this decision. The staff report that you have received does not contain these studies. It does not even indicate that the watercourses are fish-bearing. No map or aerial image of the site with the streams indicated was provided. The staff report makes assertions that this proposed development will protect watercourse land to facilitate watercourse conservation. But it also speaks of the infill and relocation of watercourses. It describes the area that will be conserved as sensitive, but never explains why the area that will be developed is not worthy of that term also. It does, however, relay how many trees are on site. And while an integrated stormwater management is a condition of this application, it rather presupposes that this application will be approved. So will the integrated stormwater management plan be a technical exercise on where to put the pipes and ponds in the future, or will it be an opportunity to look at the hydrology of Gloucester and West Creek watershed as a whole, with a view to whether or not future development in Gloucester can be supported? And all this, as part of the integrated stormwater management plan, should be done in consultation with stakeholder groups, including First Nations and conservation groups. So all these omissions in the information that you have are troublesome when it comes to this particular proposal. But they are a reminder that when it comes to development in Langley Township, the township government does not ask the right questions with regard to environmental issues. This needs to change. The focus should be to see the forest and not just the trees. And I mean that as a literal and a metaphorical statement. I would have liked to have talked some more about climate change, but others have did that so very well. And I would have also liked to have talked about the forest on site and the grave concern that I have that it will be gravely impacted as trees that are nominally set aside as protected will be cut down as per the staff report when they are deemed a hazard to the new buildings and parking lots that are to be built. This will have an adverse impact on the health of the forest and overall ecology of the site, and returns to my larger point that the designation of conserved area appears to be largely an illusion. In sum, I have great concerns that these lands will be managed as they have been in the past to the benefit of the developer, even when they have received this new conservation designation. 40 years ago, this land was set aside as an amenity for the community. Then we thought of that in terms of a golf course. Circumstances have given us not a golf course, but wetlands and a forest. Our thinking about the environment and our awareness of the climate crisis have also changed. I therefore submit that this land in its entirety should continue in its present state as an amenity for the community, and that council should reject this application and take steps to see that the whole parcel is conserved permanently. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you say take steps to ensure it is preserved permanently, what would you suggest?
Well, I think that not just township, but higher levels of government should be looking at purchasing it as a parkland area or otherwise ensuring that it's parkland area. I think that's a responsibility the township has to undertake, but obviously higher jurisdictions need to be doing that, not just in this case, but in the case of wetlands and forests throughout the Lower Mainland and the province in general. I know that the Metro Vancouver is looking at that, but I don't know to what extent funds have been set aside. So that's essentially what I mean.
Okay, thanks. Does that conclude the speakers list, Mr. Richardson?
That's correct, Your Worship. Mr. Robertson's submission concludes the speakers list.
So I'm going to suggest we've had 2 hours here almost. Maybe some members of council would like 5 minutes. So we'll take a recess here and we'll resume at 9:30 to complete the public hearing. What's Misty? Okay, we're going to resume the public hearing for C4 related to bylaws number 5885 and 5886. Are there any other submissions from the public? So we'll go with first-time speakers first, and then we'll come back to you. No, we'll come back to you. It's fine. We'll just all first-time speakers first. Great. Just get your name and general area for the record.
And I am the president of the Glen Valley Watershed Society. West Creek is one of the creeks that flows into the Fraser through or from within Glen Valley, thus Glen Valley Watershed Society, so it's part of our area of concern. I'm not going to repeat the material that was so ably presented by so many others. I'm sure you're relieved to hear. We, the society, and I myself are opposed to this application. And I would like to make 3 particular points. One is, with all respect, it does seem to me that the holding of this hearing was premature and that it's been rushed to this stage without really a very good opportunity for the public to respond, although we have to some extent. But with no opportunity here from the public subsequent to this hearing, the opportunity for dialogue is being stifled rather than encouraged. I don't know if there's anything to be done about that at this stage, but it is something that that concerns me. The second point is the loss of the community or the community amenity lands over time. Others have covered this, but the frankly cynical way that commitments which were made to get approvals in the past were reneged upon gradually, application by application, and whittled away. Well, as another said, I hope that this council will be the conscience for the developer. And the third point, if you look at your map there, you see the long, narrow strips in some cases. The importance of these is, or one of the important things about these is as wildlife corridors, without which the remaining wetland would become isolated from other potential natural areas. And so they're important from that point of view. Also, the one on the western edge, and this reflects back in the whittling down of commitments of the past. The one on the eastern edge. That's what's left of what was meant to be a broad buffer strip between industrial development and the adjacent rural lands on what was then the Matsqui side. All the rest of that has been whittled away, and so you can see that there's essentially no such buffer in the southern part of that. And this is the part that didn't have that happen, and it went ahead as it was meant to be done, and now they're trying to get rid of it. So there it is again, is that whittling away and reneging on past commitments, which were used to get approvals. So that's really about all I'd like to add from my point of view. I hope you will vote against this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other first-time speakers, submissions from the public? for a second time. Are there any first-time speakers on their submissions from the public? Ms. Perrin, you may as well come back down and carry on. Yeah. Would you like some assistance, sir, or are you? Thank you again. So just the public hearing rules are a little restrictive for us. So it's more, I'm quite happy
It's
to.
new, it's new.
It's new
Yeah,
information.
it is,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm quite happy to let you take as much time as you need to be reasonably heard. We just have to stick with the process that it's new information.
Yeah. Someone else, I think it was Kirk, mentioned trees. And as you know, right now, one of Canada's climate mitigation plans is to plant, I forget, is it a million trees or more than that? And it's one of the, their trees are carbon sinks. So in the report before you, I don't know if you've even noticed it, that this area is, there are 625 significant trees in the subject area. That's a forest, that's a lot of trees, significant trees that take carbon out of the air. And so you've got, they speculate 700 jobs. So you've got 700 more cars coming into that area, traveling into that area, and you're cutting down trees that are carbon sinks. So it's just such a bad idea for climate. And I don't know if you've ever been on Harris Road at around 5 o'clock on a weekday and tried to turn left out of the village of Matsqui Village, but a lot of cars from Gloucester coming into your neighboring community roads, which, you know what? No taxes from Gloucester paying for the roads there. And also on a Township Line Road, just off of the exit off of Gloucester to the east there off of 275th Street, just traffic like you would not believe in Abbotsford. And that's another thing. Have you considered how you're going to deal with all of this traffic, from 700 more vehicles? And that's a problem. Like, why isn't there public transit in there already? There are thousands of people that work there. Why are you forcing them to use their cars? Why isn't there a bus in there? Also, we met with Gloucester, we met with Beatty, we met with Beatty and we met with Ian White in 2022. And we said, can you not densify? Can you not take some of the parking lots that are there? And there are a lot of parking lots in Gloucester. Can you not densify? 1. 2, can you not build with green roofs, which would also help the climate? No to both of those. No, they would not push for public transit, and no, they're not interested in green roofs. Maybe it's something this council can take a really serious look at. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, are there any other submissions from the public? For a second time, are there any other submissions from the public regarding bylaws number 5885 and 5886? For a third time, are there any more submissions from the public regarding bylaws number 5885 and 5886? Seeing none, I will close submissions from the public. See whether the proponent wishes to present anything. Please come forward.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. I'm Ian White. I'm a principal with EnviroWest Consultants, a company I founded in 1984. Just for information, EnviroWest is located at 2000 Hartley Avenue in Coquitlam. I'm putting my glasses on now. My next statement, I've worked on the Gloucester development for about 30 years. And I was going to say I had black hair and didn't need these glasses when I started. Tonight I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant, Beatty. A little background for the history. In the late 1990s, and I apologize, I'm probably going to end up having to speak faster than I originally anticipated because of the added notes that I've put at the end here. I've worked closely with the federal and provincial authorities in the development of the original Water Act approvals, now WSA approval, and the Fisheries Act approval for the development of Gloucesters in exchange for a number of compensatory or offsetting habitats. In 2008, DFO signed off on all of the compensation work that had been done to that at that point in time. Works that were incomplete in accordance with those agreements at that point in time involved the works on the golf course lands. The original application was not terribly specific about what was going to happen, but the golf course land included the development of stormwater management ponds and new habitat ponds, all of which were going to be integrated into a golf course setting. And of course, the golf course never proceeded. So the current proposal, you get 90 acres approximately of land that's, as you can see in the drawing, distributed amongst a number of other lands that have previously been developed. About 40% of those lands will be used for industrial land use, or about 36 acres. 60%, or about 55 acres, will be used for ecological purposes and stormwater. And to expand on that, once complete, those lands will be transferred, the ownership to the township. So there's no future potential to go back on, any application to, come back and redevelopment. Those will be township land for conservation. The applicant and the consulting team have conducted quite a number of studies and assessments, all of which are forming part of the rezoning application that you have before you now. And they're also part of the applications that are in with the Ministry of Forest, the provincial ministry, and will be going into DFO as part of a new submission to them. It's important to point out that the consulting team, pardon me, I got a dry throat here. The consulting team includes quite a number of different companies with different expertise. That includes Blue Lines Environmental that came to the team with specialized expertise in terrain modeling and mapping and wetland hydrology. EBB Consulting with their particular expertise in beaver management, and I'll speak to beaver management a little further. Mike Fatima and Associates are the arborists who did tree inventory and tree management planning. Urban Systems Limited is an engineering firm with expertise in stormwater modeling. And Applin and Martin Consultants are the project civil engineers that will undertake the design or are working on the design of the stormwater pond with a particular emphasis on designing for future climate change. Some of the key design principles with respect to the environmental plan, that we are avoiding and protecting the ponds, wetlands, and streams of highest ecological value, those that are permanently wetted, you see water in them year-round, and that are directly connected to fish habitat. We are not proposing to totally eliminate wetlands. What we are proposing to do is infill those of lesser ecological value and functions, i.e. those that don't have water in them year-round, and those that are not directly connected to fish habitat. But not just to infill those ones, but to, on a one-for-one basis, build new wetlands, and build the new wetlands such that the new ones are connected to fish habitat and do have water in them year-round and have increased habitat functionality and increased diversity of habitat. The proposed replacement plans are consistent with DFO and Ministry of Forest policy for habitat replacement, i.e. ratios for replacing habitats. All of the habitat works will be maintained and monitored for 10 years. Money will be in place with both the township, and it will be a requirement with DFO as part of an authorization that bonding is in place that guarantees that the habitats are monitored to the point of being functional and self-sustaining at the end of the 10 years. I move now to some points that I've jotted down as some of the speakers that preceded me. So in no particular technical order, with respect to fish presence, I think it was Lisa Dreve showed a map of the classifications of streams, and a subsequent speaker spoke to the fact that maybe we didn't include such a map in any of our applications. For the most part, we're treating all of the habitats as fish inhabited. Some of them we have done recent fish sampling and found that salmon and trout are not present in some of these habitats, but we know from some of our previous works, in the monitoring of works that were done 10, 15, 20 years ago, that salmonids, salmon and trout, do or have had access to most of these habitats. So by default, we just treat them all as being, most of the ones that are being preserved certainly are the ones that have the salmonids in them, or we are assuming that they are there. There's been a lot of commentary about beavers and beaver management. We agree with what most people would say about beavers. They're great little industrious creatures that build habitat and do some fantastic things, but they also conflict with stormwater management structures. So when beaver dams are taken out, it's not with the purpose of destroying habitat, it's generally because there's stormwater management objectives that need to be achieved. For example, in the detention pond, beavers build dams in there, and by building the dams, they take away the storage capacity of the pond, such that when the big storm comes along and the ponds fill, they don't have the required capacity, which compromises the downstream habitats in West Creek because they're not functioning the way that they are supposed to. With respect to which wetlands are being infilled and which ones are being retained, a couple of the speakers put up a couple of them had stills and one had a video. By and large, everything that you saw in what you saw in the two stills and almost everything that was in the video are the high quality habitats that are being preserved. Within the video, there was just one short snippet of one of the ponds, an isolated pond that we are proposing to infill. Otherwise, everything that you saw in those photographs is being preserved. In the report that we've provided to council, you could flip through it and you can see photos and you can see the distinct difference between the type of habitat that we're proposing to infill and those that we're proposing to keep. I'll try to move along as quickly as I can here. There was commentary about invasive plants. There certainly are invasive plants on this site, some of which are currently under active management to have them eradicated. Where invasive plants occur within the proposed protected habitats or in and about areas where we're proposing to build the new habitats, part of the 10-year plan will be to ensure that the invasive plants are eradicated and maintained such that they don't recur in any of those habitat areas. A point of clarification, there was a point made about man-made channels versus habitats that were constructed previously under the DFO authorization. The man-made channels that in our report, when we talk about the man-made channels that we're proposing to infill, those are man-made channels that are not the ones that were built under the DFO authorizations of the past. Anything that was built under the DFO and provincial approvals of the past, they're preserved. They're not going anywhere. There are other man-made channels that we are talking about, infilling, and there are some of the man-made channels are going to be preserved. First Nations came up a couple of times. Through the Water Sustainability Act, which is the provincial process, and the Fisheries Act, the DFO process, both will do First Nations referrals, but the applicant has already taken the initiative of inviting out the Kwantlen First Nations, and we've had a walk about the site with the First Nations. We don't have formal comments back from the Kwantlen yet, but we had an interesting walk about them. We had some constructive comments came from them and no particular significant criticisms. But there will be ongoing work with First Nations. And with respect to trees, if we were to look at the videos that we saw of the high quality wetlands, that is also where you see most of the trees. We've made the commitment to preserve, we can't preserve everything, okay? That's me saying that, not some of the people here. Can't preserve everything, but we're saving the highest value. And the highest value is also in and about where the high value trees are. There's there's a coniferous forest stand that's basically all located east of 272 Street. Final point on the detention pond. The detention pond has to be increased in size. But to turn the clock back about 15 years to when that detention pond was first constructed, it was basically bulldozed out as a couple of basins in a field, and they threw grass seed on it. What you see today is a reflection of the resilience of Mother Nature. Mother Nature does great work on its own. Those wetlands, a lot of what you saw in the videos and the still photographs, they look fabulous. But the detention pond has to be increased in size. It's a commitment that's been made. It's an obligation that we have to live up to for the township. And in rebuilding that pond and deepening that pond, it will be landscaped with a diversity of plant species. So at the end of the day, there'll be greater habitat diversity in terms of depths of water, boulder structures, woody debris, et cetera, on the upper parts, and a much greater diversity of plant life in that pond. So at the end of the day, it'll be a much greater diversity of habitat in the detention pond. That was my final comment.
Some questions from council.
Yes.
Councilor Richter, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I have 3 questions of clarification. So you've been the consultant for Gloucester since day one?
There were, I would say there might have been a decade where there was no environmental consultant on the project prior to our, some of the development, I would guess that about 10 years of development preceded my involvement on the site. In the early days, it was actually, you'd had representatives, DFO and the Ministry of Environment back then, the province. They came out and gave some general guidance. But I mean, the level of involvement of consultants certainly increased through time.
Okay, so the comments that were made earlier about the in perpetuity, you have no understanding of that or experience with that?
In perpetuity?
That the lands that were originally set aside for the golf course were conservation lands in perpetuity?
Yeah, I wouldn't be the person to respond to that inquiry.
Oh, okay. Second question, if I understood you correctly, so 35% of the land that's left is going to be converted to industrial. That's 36 acres, and then 65%. Some of the speakers spoke about the choking off of wetlands. Have any studies been done to determine if those 36 acres are removed, that it will result in choking off the wetlands?
Well, to be clear, when the 35 acres or 40% of the site that is developed, some of the lower value wetlands, those are the ones that are not seasonally wetted and the ones that are not connected to fish habitat, they'll be replaced. So that 35 acres will be fully developed. But an equivalent extent of wetland habitat will be added on elsewhere within the protected 60% of the land base. And the habitats there they'll be designed and constructed and landscaped and maintained and monitored for 10 years to ensure that they are at least as functional. But by design, they'll be of higher functional value.
Okay, so you're taking 36 acres out and you're putting 36 acres in?
No.
No. Okay.
No, I mean, clearly, there's 90 acres and 35 acres are going to be
Gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what we're doing is taking some elements of what's in the 35 acres, specifically the wetlands and appropriate riparian areas. There's streamside areas around them, and they will be moved over. For the most part, the greatest losses of the habitat are going to be east of 272 Street, and most of the new habitat will be shifted west of 272 Street. But the wetlands will be built more than 30 meters away from any existing wetlands, so we're not overlapping any existing riparian areas, and they're built with appropriate setbacks from existing development boundaries. So we're not building wetlands right next to existing buildings. So they all have appropriate setbacks, but they're built, but there's a lot of land on the west side of, when you look at the image there, there's a lot of land that is not within 30 meters of an existing pond or wetland. And then what we do is we start from scratch and build wetlands with diversity of depth and diversity of water levels in them, and landscape them and add habitat features to maximize habitat functionality.
Okay, and the last question, has there been any discussion or consideration given to green roofs?
Again, that would be something, that's a question that would have to be posed to the applicant.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Councillor Martins.
Thank you. Just a quick question for you. You mentioned the Kwantlen First Nations were out to walk around the site with you, or and no formal feedback, but there was conversations. Can you just give me an idea of how long ago that happened? Ish?
I'm trying to remember what season that was. Would it have been this year? About a year ago, okay, last summer. I can remember it was dry at the time, so within the year.
Thank you.
Councillor Pratt.
Thank you, Your Worship. And before I ask the question, staff, could we bring up the image with the newly created lots, like Lot 5, Lot 6A, Lot 6B? Would that be possible? Yeah, that's perfect. So out of those newly created gray lots, could you identify for us which, in your opinion or your professional opinion, are the ones that are kind of deemed the lower quality in terms of environmental and ecologically sensitive areas?
Would it be unfair to ask if we have a drawing that shows the wetlands on it? If not, I mean, I can speak to what's there. Sure. Oh, there we go. Okay, so if we maybe just start at the left-hand side and work, or actually it might make more sense. Let's start at the far right-hand side against the Abbotsford boundary. So there are a couple of ponds and wetland and an interconnecting channel. And then at the bottom of that L shape, you can see there's a different property and because it's got a different zoning, there's a little stream that comes out and then goes into a storm sewer there. Those are all ephemeral. Those channels all go dry, and they go dry in the summer, and there's no access for fish into these ones. Carrying on, going to the west, there's pond, I think it's E6 and E7. Again, these glasses aren't even gonna work for that. Those are both ponds that go completely dry in the summertime. Then what's called stream E5 that drains northward, that again goes completely dry. That's a man-made channel, not one of the ones that was constructed for DFO or the ministry under any previous agreement. And then there's a little nub of a pond. It's quite wide because it was originally a ditch that was installed to convey a storm sewer that comes off of the 55 Avenue cul-de-sac. There's a stormwater outfall there. That's a ditch that was cut across the site to get to the interim detention pond. The beavers flooded it up, but that little nub of that pond is one of the ones that would be eliminated. Now, technically, that's one that we consider to be fish accessible. Going up to pond E8, the one up near 56th Avenue, that's an isolated pond. It has water in it year-round, but it's not connected to fish habitat. That actually, when the water level rises in that one, it floods out over the parking lot of the adjacent industrial lot. Everything to the west of that, with the exception of maybe the upper part of stream E2, is being retained. That's where the forest exists, and those are the higher quality wetlands. And then, of course, as we get close to 272, we get to where the existing detention pond is. Showing there, I think they're in kind of a reddish hatch. They're showing interim detention ponds. Those will all be consolidated into a larger, deeper detention pond, but also will have all the habitat features and diversity added to it. Then as we cross over 272 Street, there's a chunk of land at 272, and there's a chunk of land at the far end at 268 where the development boundary moves in. So pond W4, which was actually a relic of the original channel. The channel used to cross diagonally over 272, go up through pond 4. I don't know if any of you can recall the old Gloucester site office. There was a little channel that ran behind it, and then it crossed the street again before you got to 56th Avenue. Pond W4 is just a little relic of the historical channel. That will be infilled. That has water in it year-round, but it doesn't have access for fish. As we move slightly west, the man-made this is all, that giant pond is all man-made, constructed as a detention pond. We're going to propose to trim off the far east end and replicate that habitat elsewhere. Then everything else is retained, except that boundary at the far end, the red line, will push back out and fill in a couple of man-made channels and a little bit of the pond habitat that was constructed historically, but not constructed under DFO agreements.
I appreciate that thorough explanation. The questions I guess I have still related to that. So I point at like pond E6, E7, E8, those ones on the eastern side of the 272 piece.
Yeah.
Despite them not being wetted all year round, and E6 and E7 sounds like they don't have really access to bee fish habitat, do they not still serve a purpose in times of, significant rainfall or as a natural stormwater detention facility in effect?
Of course they do, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they have, what we're saying is they have a lesser functional value. They all have a value.
Okay.
I mean, they all have value as wildlife habitat. They all have, even if they don't have fish in them, they're still fish habitat features. We're just saying the ones that are not connected to fish habitat and the ones that don't have water in them year-round are of a lesser functional value.
Okay.
They all have functional value.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, how long has BD owned this property?
Not as long as I've been on the project, but not a question for me to answer. I don't.
Can anyone answer that?
Yell at me and I'll convey it. 2000? Since 2000.
I would like to find out more about if there was a promise of perpetuity, because if there was, I'll see that as a real violation of good faith. This 30 some odd acres that you're going to pave over, what are you going to do with the water that falls on it?
All of the water that falls on that land is treated through the drainage system that is designed by the civil engineer, and then to the detention pond that has been sized and modeled by the Urban Systems, the second engineering firm. In addition to that, there's best management practices, things like soakaways, rain gardens, biofiltration. We've suggested extensive use of gravel under the parking lots and non-structural places where we can put permeable material that we can use to put water back into the ground within the development lots and not entirely rely on the detention pond.
I would advise you use stronger language than suggest.
Fair
and
point.
Now I go to the far east. That was that originally designed as a buffer?
Along the Abbotsford boundary, there is a requirement to provide a buffer within, and there will be a buffer. It's a landscape buffer. I don't recall where we fell, and maybe the applicant can help me with respect to whether or not there's a pathway within that buffer, but there will be a linear infiltration, sort of a soak-away type of a trench, part of the hydrology mitigation plan for the site.
Yeah, because I'm really worried about when you cover this over, that water that's really important for refilling these lands is going to be diverted and not go into where it is. I don't know about this stuff, but it just seems to me that a lot of this is not going to go into refill. And if this was originally designed as a buffer, again, I want to get some more information on what kind of promises were made on this land and what was supposed to be in perpetuity. And while I understand that you may not know about it, I really expect to hear that from Beatty.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks. I had a question. What's the terminology you say when you take a pond that has a beaver in it, is functioning perfectly fine, and you need to improve it or increase its capacity, so you deepen it? Is that correct?
I was specifically speaking about the detention pond,
Yeah.
you know, and not specifically about just a natural pond with
Right.
the beavers in it.
So it's good to differentiate. You're going to be doing some of that work to some areas,
We're-
but not
well,
to every area.
The theme of the beaver management plan is to work with the beavers. So the idea isn't that we're going to eradicate them from the site because they're troublemakers and we'll just get rid of them. The plan is that with all of the natural habitats and the detention pond, there's a lot of measures that can be done to work with the beavers. A beaver deceiver, for example, is something that, you know, beavers love to build a dam, but if you know, the way they build a dam is they find the lowest point and they keep building it higher and higher and higher until they have a dam. But they'll only build it higher if the water flows over the top. So if you put pipes, for example, underneath the dam and they can't figure out where the water's coming from, they tend not to build those blockages, you know, on the streams. So that's part of what we're doing. What I was getting at with the detention pond, I don't know what the current condition is because they have to be removed and things have to happen with the beavers because that detention pond is like a giant bathtub. It has to drain completely out between storms so that it has the capacity to fill during the design storm. If a beaver, and they have been doing this, they go inside the detention pond and they build dams that, you know, raise the water level, you know, what we call the dead storage. Dead storage is the lowest water. But if they raise that by a meter times how many acres of pond you have, that's lost capacity. So when the storm hits, it's like that might as well be dirt. It might as well be you didn't build your pond large enough. So in order to meet the stormwater management criteria, we have to manage the ponds so that the capacity of the pond is always there.
And did you say something about you deepen the pond? Is that correct?
What will happen, well, because it has to go up to, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 99,500 cubic meters. You know, so 10 hectares, you know, approximately 10 hectares a meter deep. So it's not going to be 10 hectares, so it has to be more than 1 meter deep. So one of the ways that they can increase the size of the pond is to make it lower, but you can only make it so low because the elevation going out is already set. A combination of going deeper and having the water going higher by contouring, but primarily by making the area larger. Those are sort of the three things that you have to do to reach the design capacity for the pond.
Okay.
And then on an ongoing basis, we have to work with the beavers, but manage the beavers so that they don't, you know, compromise the capacity of the pond.
Well, I'll come back. I have a few more questions. Councillor Bailey?
So when you're doing this work on the ponds and you know, the beavers don't, what happens to the fish in there? What happens to the salmonoid that are in those ponds? If you're in there digging, you're going to get sediment, you're going to get an awful lot of it. What's going to happen to all the other species other than the beavers?
Couple of different parts of that. One is there's timing windows on when the work is done. So you can't, you know, when, for example, the beaver and other wildlife have their young, there's a period in which you can't do that work. Similarly with the fish, similarly with birds. We can't, because there's birds nesting all throughout those wetlands. So we can't do any work during the bird nesting season. Pushes us back into the summer because the ideal time to do work in fish habitat is in August and September when, I mean, it's like everything, there's no perfect time to do anything, but it's the least risk window is what it's referred to. It's the time of year when fish are least sensitive, you know, to human disturbances. But what will happen is the water will be drawn down. Any inflow coming at the top end will be piped, pumped, somehow diverted around the work area. The work site will be drained out, and then teams of people will be in there doing what we call a fish salvage. They'll be capturing the fish and wildlife because there'll be frogs, there'll be amphibians, there'll be other critters in there. We need federal and provincial fish collection permits that we have to adhere to the conditions of, and a provincial wildlife salvage permit for capturing and relocating things like salamanders and frogs. So all of that has to happen. within restricted timing windows, with a lot of mitigative measures to ensure that we don't send dirty water downstream during the works.
So when this is going on, what do they deem as acceptable losses? Because I'm quite sure that's a calculation that they try to come up with.
I don't know that you get anybody to put a number on that, but you're probably asking what probably a good question. It's probably in a wetland of that size impossible to capture every single organism that's in there.
Yeah, I'm not asking that. I'm saying, how much do they say they're going to lose? And then they deem that acceptable.
What we do is we scale the mitigation efforts to the side. I mean, we'll probably have a couple of people in there, or a couple of teams of people in there for a couple of weeks, doing nothing but capturing, which is why they also scale the project that maybe they only do half at a time, because that original pond was constructed in 2 lobes with a channel down the middle. So bite off as little as you can so that you can, minimize what you have to manage at any given time. But there will be a lot of effort going into fish and wildlife salvages.
Thanks. Yeah, so I just kind of want to clarify one last thing. One of the comments I think you made around some of the queries around the 30 acres versus the 55. So is it fair to say your submission to the province is, because I'm not sure, you've already applied to the province, is that correct?
Yes, we've had ongoing negotiations. In fact, we've got an upcoming field meeting with them pretty soon.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, that you remove 33 acres of
35.
35.
40% of the site, 35 acres.
And you called it less impactful or less beneficial. What was the terminology you used?
Well, the habitats is a general statement. What's in those 35 acres is of lower ecological value than is in the 60% of the site that's going to be preserved, protected, but it includes the reconstructed detention pond. But at the end of the day, will be transferred, the ownership will be transferred to the township.
And you would be improving the remaining 55. Is that the understanding?
Within that, those are, again, looking at the image that you have up there, east of 272, all the wetlands or ponds, E4, 5, 2, 11, most of those are being preserved in their current condition. They're not going to be touched. Those are the ones that you saw in the video. Also in the video, you saw a lot of aerials of the detention pond. The detention pond will also be turned over to the township after, it's been proven out to have been constructed to its, design standards, and all the habitat functionality has been restored.
Great. I don't have any other questions. Anyone else in council have any questions? Appreciate the submission. With that, close the public hearing for item C4. Yeah, I'm sorry. The public hearing for public submissions from the public was closed earlier. Then we heard from the submission from the proponent, and that concludes the public hearing for item C4. That's the process. So with that, I close the public hearing on item C4. Does anybody wish to consider moving third reading of this application? That doesn't look like anybody's interested in that. So with that, we're going to motion to terminate. Yes. Moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Martins. All those in favor of termination? Anyone opposed? Carried.